Just before we get the video started, I want to talk to you guys about a great new app called Real Cappers. If you go to the App Store, you go to the Google Play Store, you can find it. And Real Cappers is a sports prediction platform that's a little bit different than others because what they do is they try to find the best predictors and cappers on the internet. They aggregate them all into one place where you can go to their website, to their app, download it, check it out, and you can see where all the cappers currently are on either side of a fight, and you could base the percentage, like if 60% of people are on Charles Johnson, 40% of people are on Rafael Estevam. Charles Johnson is an underdog. Maybe Charles Johnson would be a good underdog bet to go and put on at the sports book for you. So I think it's a very good program in terms of that, and they are going to be branching off into other sports. And you could go on the site, you could sign up yourself and get predictions if you feel you are up to par. People can go, they could search your predictions, they could pay for them, so you can make some money as well with this app. So definitely go to Real Cappers, check it out, download it. It's for free on the App Store, on the Google Play Store. Definitely check them out. I appreciate Real Cappers, and you should definitely check them out. I think they're a great app. Yo, what's up, guys? We're back for another breakdown and predictions video. This week we got a pretty good card, and we've been on a pretty good roll, man, making predictions. We've been hitting at a really good rate. Last week we won on the main event, co-main event, which were tricky fights, and we won in terms of Patreon betting overall last week. We've had 3 or 4 consecutive winning weeks, so definitely have been doing really well betting-wise, prediction-wise, so it's a great opportunity and time for you guys to go over to patreon.com/MMA Prediction Guru, support the channel. There's a lot of MMA going on this week. There's huge Bellator card, which I am going to be breaking down in full over there on Patreon. There's an LFA event, Octagon MMA event, quite a few events going on. There's PFL next week, so definitely go over to Patreon, check it out. I have a discount for the non-UFC portion for this week, and I'm going to continue it throughout the rest of the year. So you guys go over there, you could sign up for the non-UFC, get access to Bellator and everything else. So hopefully some of you guys do that. And other than that, man, hit the like button, put some comments down below. Let's try to get over 100 likes on this video. I'd really appreciate everyone that's listening right now. Hit that like button. It's really easy. It's free. It helps with the algorithm. So hit the like button. Put a comment down below. Let's try to get a lot more engagement on this video. I'd really appreciate that. And try to end the year strong with some good views. But let's get in this first fight of the night here. Denis Tallulah, and he's taking on Christian Leroy Duncan. This is a short notice fight, and I don't have too much to say regarding this fight. You know, it just kind of popped up on me, and Christian Leroy Duncan is a pretty big favorite. He was the person that was originally on the card. He was going to fight another striker in Cesar Almeida, who looked okay on the Contender Series, showed off that he had some grappling in his back pocket that maybe people didn't know about. And Denis Tallulah jumping up on here in short notice after his loss to Gregory Rodriguez, where he got knocked out in that fight, which was fairly recently. I mean, that was only, 3 months ago? And it wasn't like he got knocked out cold, but he ate some huge elbows. It was actually a pretty brutal finish. So I think this is a fast turnaround, personally, for Tallulah, but obviously, you know, he's not really in that position where he can deny a UFC fight, I don't think, with his current record, his age, and just the performances that he's given. Christian Leroy Duncan, he came into the UFC with a lot of hype. He won in his debut, but if you remember, it was an injury and didn't, kind of an anticlimactic win. And then kind of had the air come out of the balloon in a second UFC fight where Armen Petrosyan decisioned him. But this fight, you look at both these guys, Tallulah, brawler, he likes to come forward, try to kind of make fights ugly, can be decent in a war, but I do think his durability is kind of waning, and then his grappling is basically zero. You look at Christian Leroy Duncan, he is one of these guys that's very athletic and has long-range weapons, tries to kind of pull you into these wild attacks, but he can grapple as well. I think his grappling is what he's going to show off in this fight, because he was going to fight a high-level kickboxer, so he probably is going to have his striking defense on point, and I think he's going to have more of a wrestling game plan for that fight, which could transfer over well to this fight. He has submissions as an amateur. He has quite an extensive amateur career, has had some submissions as a pro, and I think he can get Tallulah down and either ground and pound him out or submit him, and I feel like even on the feet, Maybe Tallulah could give him a little bit of issues with that forward pressure and just making the fight wild, but Duncan could also run him into something sweet and knock him out. So I think this is Christian Leroy Duncan's fight to lose personally, and I do believe that he is the sizable favorite for a reason, but I feel like the under, if it's not anything under minus 300, is a better play than the money line just because it's a crazy fight, but Christian Leroy Duncan should definitely win, and I'm going to go with Duncan inside the distance. I'll say he wins via first or second round submission. And in this next one, we got a striking fight between Jeka Saragih and Lucas Alexander. Both 28-year-old prospects. Saragih, he got signed to the UFC via the Road to UFC tournament in Asia. Ended up having his first UFC fight in February of this year, losing in the finals to Anchel Jubli, who kind of just got fraud checked a little bit, so not the best loss there. And Lucas Alexander got in the UFC through stepping up on short notice in October of last year against Joanderson Brito. Brito took him out in the first round, but Alexander returned in March of this year, got a win over Steven Peterson, sent Steven Peterson into retirement, and neither of these guys were anticipating fighting each other. It's another short notice matchup, but both fighters were training for fights coming up. Like Lucas Alexander, he was going to fight David Onama on November 4th, but Onama pulled out with an injury. Jeka Saragih, he was on this card, and he was going to fight Jesse Butler, but Butler withdrew, so now they have the new matchup between these two fighters, and when you look at it, I think you're going to be hard-pressed to pick Jeka Saragih. I mean, matchup-wise, I do think it's a decent matchup because it's probably not a guy that's really going to look to take him down, but even then, Alexander did show a decent clinch game, body lock game against Steven Peterson, training out of Fusion XL. It might be the smart game plan to go in there and just use your grappling, because Saragih, on the feet is where he has his chance to win. I mean, the guy has some power. He has obviously good timing on that rear cross, and he can pull you into it, but that's really all he really looks for and has at this point in his career. I don't really think he's that refined, whereas I feel like Lucas Alexander has a more well-rounded striking game that he showed off against Peterson. The leg kicks were there. I think he could be a little bit more diverse and cleaner with the striking. Saragih's more reliant on that one shot, and I think Alexander will have the volume edge. He's a little bit bigger guy, longer guy, and like I said, I think if he does want to go to the grappling, he could potentially have an edge there, especially with the guys that he's training with. And I just don't think Saragih is UFC level at this point, so he's going to have to prove me wrong by defeating somebody in the UFC, and that's why I'm going to be currently picking Lucas Alexander to get the win, and I'll say he wins this fight via decision. And in my opinion, in one of the most interesting and higher level fights on the card, we got Rafael Estevam. He's taking on Charles Johnson. And with Rafael Estevam, he's a super well-conditioned grinder. He has pretty fast level changes, decent wrestling, strong with body locks, and on top he has good top pressure, good submission defense and ground and pound, and just kind of grinds fighters down, punches, elbows, forearms. And his last two victories, he's won with ground and pound finishes. He has 3 submission wins too, so he has kind of variations of finishes on the ground. In his last fight, he fought on Contender Series. He fought an opponent that was a guard puller that had a lot of faith in his submissions off his back, and we saw Estevam completely nullify all the submissions, get his opponent tired, and then finish him with ground and pound. And I do think one of his advantages is his cardio. He pushes the pace. On the feet, he really isn't the best. He kind of pressures, tries to throw a lot of front kicks, round kicks to the body. He'll stay active with the kicks and then occasionally throw a big hook or overhand. And he's fairly explosive, but no boxing. Very defensively irresponsible in boxing range. He's been dropped before against low-level opponents, lower-level opponents. They had decent record, but I just wasn't that impressed. And I would imagine Estevam will be hard to knock out just because he hasn't taken much damage. He's undefeated. He has great conditioning. But this is going to be the best opponent that he's faced. The first non-Brazilian opponent, which I think is a point that has to be made going into this matchup, because a lot of Brazilians, what's the issue that they have? It's wrestling defense. They don't come up with their culture of wrestling. Charles Johnson is a guy with a USA Wrestling tattoo on his back. I mean, maybe he's gotten out wrestled by Cody Durden, by Muhammad Makayev, by Zalgas, but is he going to get out wrestled by Estevam? I mean, that's I don't know if that's going to be as easy a task for Estevam. But Charles Johnson, huge guy for the weight class, and I think he's the much better striker in this matchup. He needs to pressure here, use his boxing, nullify the kicks, and shut down that wrestling of Estevam. If he can keep it standing, he should piece Estevam up pretty easily. Nasty kicks with his Muay Thai, good knees, elbows, high volume offense. But I think in this fight, the boxing is really going to be what he wants to really use. And he can also wrestle pretty well. I mean, he's a good scrambler. He's run into some of the best wrestlers in the division and lost due to getting out wrestled. But that doesn't change the fact that he's a good grappler in his own right. And he's been able to make those guys like Mikhail and Durden work. He's been able to get back up to his feet quite a few times and not just been completely destroyed in those fights. But I think he should be able to compete in the wrestling with Estevam in this fight. And Estevam isn't really a crazy submission threat. Like, it's not like he's going to be throwing up submissions off his back, I doubt, or putting Charles Johnson in crazy submission danger. So I think if Johnson could scramble with him and match his wrestling, he'll be able to have a great chance to win. The issue for me with Johnson is he is 32. He's getting a little bit older. And he's fighting at a torrid pace. So I'm not that worried about his cardio, but if he loses 3 in a row, that could be a death blow to his career. You don't really know where his head's at. He has done well against Brazilians. He's 2-0 against Brazilians in the past. He's fought way higher level opponents on his resume in comparison to Estevam. And he needs to use all that to avoid losing 3 fights for the first time in his career. I think that, his last loss to Durden kind of has aged nicely because it was competitive and Durden has been unbeaten since. He's, broken into the rankings, and I think Charles Johnson can get the win here. I think he should have too many weapons, better wrestling, way better boxing, and I think he has a chance to get the knockout too. You can't let Estevam grind him out and just kind of nullify him, but it's a step down, and if Johnson is on point, I think he gets it done here. He's taking some time off, which I like to see. He kind of had a lot of fights in a row, and now he's taking a break. Hopefully he comes back a little rejuvenated, and I think he can come out here and pick up the win against a more one-dimensional fighter here in Rafael Estevam. And this next matchup I'm not going to speak on too much just because the person, Jose Johnson, who I think has a good matchup here stylistically, is just untrustworthy, and at a minus 200 price tag, I just don't think it's worth really speaking about too much. I think it's a total pass fight. But Anheliger, kind of, he's a shifty guy. He'll switch stance and can be explosive, but he could struggle to close that distance and kind of relies on fighters making mistakes so he can land big hammers, knock him out. Nice inside game, like good knees, good elbows, but I think he's going to struggle to let his knees off against such a big guy, and I think Johnson is going to be able to control if they're in that inside clinch type of warfare, and Anheliger doesn't really have that option to take him down. I don't think he has the wrestling. I think if anything, Jose Johnson can use the wrestling like he used on Jack Cartwright. If Anheliger starts to get a little bit desperate and wild with the striking, get him down. And I think Johnson's striking is just a little bit too good. I mean, he's going to use his length to stick on the outside, probably not give Anheliger those opportunities to knock him out. But we have seen, in a recent fight, Johnson give up that space, get caught by Motta Martinez and KO'd. So Anheliger does have that chance to kind of just catch him with a shot, but if he can't find that chin over 3 rounds, I think Johnson's just going to be cleaner striker, maybe even get a takedown or two and be able to win this fight fairly easily. But I just don't have a lot of trust in Johnson at this point because he hasn't fared the best at UFC level. So kind of a pass for me, but I think Jose Johnson's going to get the job done in this one, pick up his first UFC victory. And this next fight, we got an awesome fight. 2 guys that are on a roll right now that are looking really good, kind of to see who's going to jump into that top 10 in the 145-pound division with Joanderson, Brito, and Jonathan Pearce. Joanderson, Brito kind of has gotten a little bit lucky. Lucas Alexander, Weston Wilson, they were both really short notice opponents, UFC debutants, and Brito knocked him out and submitted them really fast in the first round. So even though he's gotten those wins don't really mean too much. And this is going to be a big test, big step up. He did knock out Andre Fili, which is a big victory, but he also does have a loss in the UFC. Both these guys lost their UFC debuts, and they have not lost since, where Joanderson Brito, he lost to Bill Algeo. Jonathan Pearce, he lost to Joe Lozon. And since then, they've been doing really well, but Jonathan Pearce definitely has been fighting the better competition. I mean, Makwan Amirkhani, I don't think is a great victory, but he beat Christian Rodriguez, who's looking good. He beat Darren Elkins, who's still, I mean, Darren Elkins, you could say what you want about him, but he's a tough out, and he's still in the UFC picking up victories. He just won his last UFC fight. But this is much different than Darren Elkins. I mean, you got a lot more danger here with Joanderson, Brito, a guy that very explosive, especially in that first round. He's going to come out throwing absolute heat. He's going to be moving in and out. I think he's going to have a big speed advantage on JSP. And JSP is definitely going to have to get in there. He's going to have to use his size. He's going to have to use his durability to eat a few shots to get in that clinch, start hanging on Brito, start putting in kind of damage in that dirty boxing range, and then eventually dragging him to the mat, holding him down, beating him up, and then either finding that submission, decision, ground and pounding him out. Brito has gotten tired in previous fights, and Brito has been able to rely on his offensive wrestling to take guys down, hold them down, to slow the pace of fights, where with Jonathan Pearce, I don't know if he's going to have that luxury. So obviously Pearce is going to be wanting to push the pace. He's going to be wanting to try to make the fight ugly. But in that same sense, you look at JSP striking, the guy leaves a lot of openings to be hit. He's not really defensively the best. So Joanderson Brito also can, land some big shots. If he comes in with a good game plan, I think the game plan for Brito would be to keep it striking, man. Don't really try to engage in the wrestling, the grappling. Use your speed advantage. Get JSP to come to you, touch him up, either knock him out in that first round or just beat him up and kind of make the cardio even, because you beat him up so bad that, it's damage versus cardio, and usually I'll take the guy that's a little bit tired over the guy that's beat up really badly. And then for JSP, it's obviously he just has to get Brito into that exhaustion state, and then he could take over the fight. So definitely could go either way. Personally, I'm going to side with Joanderson Brito just because I feel like he is going to come in here with the better game plan in this one, and I think he's going to keep it on the feet. I think Pearce is going to struggle to close that gap without getting hit with some significant shots, and I think that Anderson Brito has a chance to finish him in that first round too. So give me Joanderson Brito here. What I don't want to see Brito doing is pulling guard, jumping guillotine, doing all these silly things that he's done against these other guys. And if he does do that, then I could see him end up either getting finished or losing. But if he comes in there with a good game plan, I think he should be too much for JSP and be able to get the victory. And up next here, not too interested in this fight. Mick Parkin versus Caio Machado. Low-level heavyweight fight. Both these guys got in the UFC through Contender Series. Parkin, he has already gotten a win in the UFC. This is the debut for Machado. Mick Parkin, I think, is the more well-rounded guy. I think he could mix it up. I feel like the first round, you could even give that round to Machado. Machado comes out hard in the first round. He'll throw a lot of body head attacks. I don't think he has a ton of power, but at heavyweight, obviously you got to be respectful of any strike that is coming your way. And Machado will throw body head. He has fairly decent hand speed, and he has good toughness. I mean, he wants you to get in a brawl with him. His takedown defense looks pretty good. He's fairly athletic for a heavyweight, but definitely slows down majorly. And I feel like if you kind of take that blitz from him early, Mick Parkin, stay defensively responsible, defend a lot of those shots, don't take big damage, and then get your clinch game going, kind of just wear him out forward pressure, you could start to land your striking too and start to kind of get the win, just like he did against Jamal Pogues. I feel like it's a similar matchup, even though I think Machado is going to be throwing more volume, maybe be a little bit more game, a little bit more nasty. Pogues had the speed and the technical edge on Machado, so I think they're kind of similar level opponents, and I think Mick Parkin kind of skate by with that similar type of fight that he had his last fight, but I'm not really sold on either guy moving forward in the division. I don't see Mick Parkin making a big impact unless he has some improvements. I don't really see Machado doing too much. So I see this more as a low-level heavyweight fight, but I say Mick Parkin gets the win, and I'll say he wins via decision. And up next, we got Ailin Perez taking on Lucie Pudilova. An interesting fight. I mean, even though they're the same age, I would say it's more of a prospect versus veteran fight, because Lucie Pudilova has quite a few fights in the UFC. She was signed to the UFC, she got cut, she came back. So she has a lot of experience, whereas This is only the third UFC fight for Ailin Perez, only the 10th or 11th fight of her pro career, whereas it's the 23rd for Pudilova. But I'm going with Perez in this one. I feel like it's a pretty easy matchup. It's a kind of a setup fight for Ailin Perez. You look at Lucie Pudilova, she got cut from the UFC because she struggled with wrestlers, struggled with kind of inactivity in the striking when she was on the feet, came back to the UFC, and I'm not seeing a ton of improvement. I mean, I think she did improve her offensive wrestling, but I still think she has the same issues with the lower volume on the feet. I think her striking is probably better than Perez's, but I think Perez is more impactful and meaner on the feet. I think she's going to bring that pressure and just throw more volume. And I think ultimately, though, she's going to be too powerful with the wrestling. She's going to be able to hit her takedowns, bring it to the ground. Pudilova won't be able to get back up to her feet when she's on her back. She's not going to pose any submission threat. And I think Perez can kind of just grind out the fight. Perez is going to come in good shape. She's training MMA Masters with that female fight team over there that's been on a roll recently. Pudilova, she has to travel from her country over to the U.S., and I just think it's Ailin Perez's fight to win here. I think she's going to go in there and she's going to look impressive again with the wrestling. It's only, you got to kind of be a little bit trepidatious, though, just because Ashley Evans Smith off a big layoff. You don't exactly know where Ashley Evans Smith is at in her career. Maybe Perez is just going to look completely terrible in this fight, get exposed as a non-UFC level fighter, but ultimately I think she's going to be able to use that wrestling to get the job done personally. So I'm going to go with Ailin Perez via decision. And in this next fight, we got Trey Ogden taking on Nickolas Motta. And you look at Nickolas Motta, he's an athletic brawler. He has good speed, with his feet and his hands, and he has good side-to-side movement. You'll see him be evasive, get fighters to come to him, and then close the distance with 1-2s, 1-1-2s. He'll follow those combinations with big left hooks, and the left hook is usually the shot that sits fighters down. He's really powerful with that, and when he does throw, though, he sits down and lets go with full power. He could throw wide, so he is there to be countered a little bit. He doesn't move his head the best, and he usually just relies on that in-and-out movement and his power. But if fighters stay in the pocket, Motta will just wing big hooks, and you could see an opponent counter him clean, knock him out, which you've seen several times throughout his career. And he is coming back off of a knockout loss, which was pretty brutal, just a little over 4 months. So that, to me, is a little bit worrisome. But he is fighting an opponent with 0 knockout wins. So that definitely, I think, is part of the reason probably why he accepted this matchup. But Motta's chin to me is still a little bit suspect. Usually when you have a Motta fight, it's either he's knocked out or his opponent gets knocked out. That's usually the way that it goes. He isn't a fighter who looks to take fighters down or grapple, but he's strong, he's athletic, he's training with Extreme Couture, so I think it's going to be very difficult to take him down. And cardio for Motta isn't an issue. Comes into fights in shape. He can even maintain his power for the full 15 minutes. So his opponent, Trey Ogden, point fighter. He has good feints, solid jab. He likes to use his jab, his kicks to get fighters to chase him, and then you'll use that check hook or level change and work to get it to the ground. And good speed. He'll stay defensively sound and kind of patient on the feet. He doesn't throw strikes with bad intentions, though, and everything is kind of just touching to score points. He is, like I said, they call him the Ghost, and very evasive, fast guy, maintains distance well, fights to the same game plan for the whole duration of the fight. And his patience can also be his Achilles heel in fights, though, because you look at his last fight with Bahamondes, kind of just let himself lose over 15 minutes by throwing no volume, and just a very low-volume fighter, doesn't take the risks to win a fight or doesn't really change up his game if he's losing. And he has good timing on his doubles. He'll use the double leg entry to come up into trips or body locks and okay submissions, top control, but I don't think he's going to be able to take down Motta, and I see this being more of a stand-up fight. And I think this likely is going to be a tactical fight. Both fighters are on the last fight of their 4-fight deals. They're both 1-2, so I think there's going to be a lot of hesitation and not want to make a mistake. And in general, they both counter-strike, and Motta's chin is bad, but Ogden has never gotten a knockout in 20 pro fights. Ogden, he's never been finished with strikes, and Motta has 0 submission losses or submission wins. So more than likely, I see this fight going to decision with a lot of staring at each other, kind of looking in the mirror, feigning. And I'm going to edge it to Motta just because I think he's going to be just that little much more aggressive. I think he's going to be throwing with slightly more bad intentions, and I feel like he'll nab it on the scorecard. So give me Nickolas Motta, but kind of a tricky fight, and I think it's going to go to decision here. And this next fight, this is another short notice matchup with Uros Medic. He's taking on Myktybek Orolbai now, and the thing with this fight, it's an interesting fight. I mean, I think it's a great short notice replacement because very difficult fight for Medic. I'm, kind of surprised he would accept this matchup. It's a totally different fight than Johnny Parsons, who he's originally going to fight, which was a pure Muay Thai striker. Now he's fighting a guy that's probably going to come in here with a wrestling heavy game plan. And with Orolbai, you got a guy, it's going to be his UFC debut. But I was fairly impressed with this guy for a few reasons. I mean, he has had some experience coming in on short notice, spoiling the show. He took a fight in the LFA in Brazil on short notice against a Brazilian fighter, went in there, took him out, and I feel like he looked pretty impressive in the LFA. But you look at Uros Medic, he has the UFC experience, coming off a big win in the UFC over Matt Semmelsberger, and definitely is an improving guy that's kind of a mystery in his own right, where it's like hasn't competed that frequently. A lot of his fights ended quick, so it's hard to know exactly his skill level, but he's been grinding with King's MMA and a lot of fantastic fighters over there, so definitely is an interesting guy. And you look at Medic, I mean, if you keep it on the feet, I think Uros is better. He's just more dynamic. He's going to be throwing the leg kicks. I think his speed, his footwork is going to be on a little bit of a different level than Orolbai, but Orolbai isn't a slouch on the feet either. He has great composure, good forward pressure. He has solid boxing and big power. I mean, if he lands, you could feel it. You could tell that, when he lands clean on his opponents, they really could feel it. He has kind of natural power. But I think he needs to wrestle here. Uros Medic, he's fought a lot of strikers, especially in the UFC. And if you look back at his career when he was fighting in Alaska, he was fighting bigger guys, but he was getting taken down by some of these guys. And Orolbai, he has good wrestling game. He could take guys down. He could hold you down. Good body locks, good takedowns against the cage. I've seen him beat guys over 15 minutes, just hold him down for the whole time. And I'm going to lean towards the more well-rounded guy in Orolbai. I know Medic is the better striker. He has the UFC experience. He has the speed, kind of more dynamic striking. But I think if Orolbai comes in with a good game plan where he could use his wrestling, he could even maybe set up the hands and land some big strikes on the feet himself. And I think that his composure and just experience and coming in on short notice, being in shape, I have faith that he's going to be ready to go here. And I think, he's in the U.S., he's training out of Team Alpha Male, so the, the travel and all that isn't going to be too big of an issue. So I'm going to go with Orolbai. I'm going to say he wins this one and gets it done via decision with his wrestling. And up next year, we got a fight between two judo girls, Luana Pinheiro and Amanda Ribas. Amanda Ribas, she is the much more well-known UFC fighter. She's been ranked in the top 10 in 2 different divisions. She has fought the who's who. She's coming off a back-and-forth fight where she did end up getting finished in the 3rd round against Macy Barber, but competed well. And Luana Pinheiro, she kind of just broke into the upper echelon in her last fight by defeating Michelle Waterson-Gomez. And even that fight, that was kind of a controversial victory where a lot of people felt like Waterson-Gomez deserved the win. So Pinheiro, she's still trying to prove herself here, and that's why you see Amanda Ribas with the minus 230-ish price tag. And I do think when you look at it from that perspective with the money line, it's a dog or pass because it's hard for me to justify Amanda at that price. I mean, you look at Pinheiro, I do admit she kind of looks a little bit like she could be a fraud, just her cardio, and I don't know about her mental game, but very explosive girl. She could close that distance and hit hard, and Ribas had issues with pressure and with girls that hit hard, so her chin is kind of questionable, and I feel like these girls should nullify each other in the grappling. I mean, if anyone has the edge, I think it'll be Ribas, and I think it'll be later in the fight after Pinheiro gets tired. And on the feet, I do feel like Ribas is the better overall striker. Like, she controls the distance better. If it's a pretty striking fight, she can kind of pull counter, stick and move, and land some nice strikes with her distance control. So Pinheiro just kind of has to go for it, I feel like, try to get crazy on the feet and pressure, find that chin of Ribas, be in great shape and push the pace, because Ribas isn't going to get tired, and if you blow your wad trying to finish her, she's going to be back in that second, third round and really beating you up. So I'm going to lean towards Ribas with the experience, and just I think she's a better overall fighter. I feel like she's mentally tougher, and the one thing, though, is just her chin is a question mark. Pinheiro's one of the few girls where I think she could land and hurt somebody with her hands. And, yeah, I feel like Pinheiro's an athletic beast, but I just don't know if she mentally and just overall technically in the cage is going to put it all together. So I'm going to go with Amanda Ribas to get the win. I think she can win inside the distance or via decision. I think this is one of these fights where it's like the inside the distance does have a decent price tag, but I'm going to pick Ribas to win via decision. And this fight was a tough one to break down for me. I mean, I personally don't think Talbott warrants that crazy price, like minus 700. I get the guy looks like a beast. Kind of a very interesting personality too. Like, there's just something about him. He has an aura where you could see he could be, the next star or a big star in the UFC. But minus 700 in your UFC debut, I mean, I don't know how anyone can get behind that and start betting that. But, yeah, he's taking on Nick Aguirre, who's 0-1 in the UFC so far. He went in there, he took on Dan Argueta and kind of just got dominating that fight with the wrestling of Argueta. And before that, Nick Aguirre had a lot of easy fights against lower level opponents, whereas what I like from Payton Talbott is the guy has tested himself and he's fought good opponents. He's been in wars, and it seems like he just could take damage, keep coming forward. He's a Terminator, and Aguirre got tired in his last fight, so I understand all the reasons why Aguirre would be a big underdog, but it's just Payton Talbott has a reckless style. I don't think Aguirre's going to be the guy that catches him and knocks him out, but someone's probably going to eventually do it. And we don't really know a lot about Talbott's grappling acumen, wrestling acumen. I know he has a decent wrestling background, and his wrestling defense is held up pretty well, but he has been taken down in some of these fights, been able to pop up really quickly, and that's been kind of his MO, where he gets taken down, gets back up to his feet, doesn't get tired, breaks you, and finishes you in the later rounds. But Nick Aguirre, I mean, fairly high-level grappler. If he can get the wrestling going, maybe he could do something to Talbot on the ground. So I just feel like the line isn't warranted. But when you look at the fight from a whole, I mean, if you're just picking it, you can't pick Nick Aguirre. I mean, the guy got tired. He showed no striking. He showed bad wrestling in his debut. In previous fights, he was fighting lower-level opponents, and he submitted them quick, so it's hard to really surmise too much from that. And Talbot has shown a lot on tape that you could be really, happy about seeing, with his toughness, his cardio, pressure, his dynamic striking, his power, his ability to get up when he's taken down. So Talbot should get this win. I think he's going to win either via decision or in the later rounds like he usually does. But yeah, I just think the line's a little bit crazy personally, but I'm going to go with Payton Talbot to win this fight. And up next year, man, I'm excited for this fight. Chase Hooper taking on Jordan Leavitt. Should be a fun grappling affair, maybe even a striking fight between two grapplers. But a fight where I think the money line is off. I feel like this should be closer to a pick'em. Don't understand how Hooper is such a big favorite. You look at, I think a lot of people are holding that original loss to Claudio Puelles against Jordan quite significantly. I think they're looking at that fight. They're saying, Jordan Leavitt gassed out in that fight. And if Chase Hooper and Jordan have a similar fight where it's a lot of scrambling on the ground, Chase Hooper is going to break Jordan. He's going to gas him out, and you'll either finish him or decision him. And I understand that. But going into that fight with Claudio Puelles, Jordan Leavitt was undefeated. He had never really been in that type of a fight in his career. And personally, I feel like he just had to learn that fight that, he needs to come in a little bit better shape. He needs to know that these other guys can compete with him in that grappling realm. And I think he also learned that, man, I got to learn how to strike. I got to learn how to keep it standing and, do damage on these guys. And I feel like recently he showed more of that. I mean, I feel like in the Paddy Pimblett fight on the feet, Jordan Leavitt was getting the better of the striking and he even, was doing better on the feet. Even if you're pushing the guy against the cage, holding him on the fence, it's still stand up and you're still winning with that dirty boxing and kind of just nullifying the space. And then he went in there against Victor Martinez. He knocked him out. He showed nice knees, nice elbows, improved striking. And I don't think he's ever going to go out there and look like Alex Pereira, but I feel like he's further progressed in the striking and just kind of mentality that I got to be mean in there. I got to throw heavy strikes and go for the knockout as opposed to Chase Hooper. I mean, Chase Hooper got that nice win over Nick Fiore. He has another few performances where he's looked really good and kind of beating guys up on the ground. But I feel like if Jordan Leavitt can use his wrestling in reverse in this one, keep it standing more, I think he could really land clean, do damage on the feet, and beat Chase Hooper up. I think he's the better striker and the better wrestler. And I think he could compete in the grappling too. I think if it goes to the ground, I think Leavitt's going to be in better shape and he's going to be ready to go, man. So, full disclosure, I obviously am a little biased, but I'm going to go with Jordan Leavitt, and I think he's going to win this one. I think he's going to get, he could get a knockout win here again, so don't be surprised. And Jordan Leavitt, I'll say second round knockout. And in the co-main event here, to me, we got another kind of setup fight for Michael Morales. I think the UFC is really trying to build this guy into a star. I think they're going to give him the win here and, then move him maybe in his next fight into like a top 10, top 5 matchup because still a young guy, 24 years old. There's no need to rush him. And Jake Matthews, he used to be that guy back in the day where he was the young guy coming up. People had high hopes for him. But at this point, 29 years old, he's been in the UFC for like a decade, had a ton of fights in the UFC. You kind of know exactly what he is. He's a guy that can beat these lower level guys right outside the top 15, but you give him that step up, maybe even not top 15, like top 25 level, and he tends to falter in those fights. So in this one, I mean, obviously on the feet, I don't really see how he can compete. I think he's going to have to get on the inside and really have a, kind of fuck it type of attitude and try to use that boxing like he did against Fiallo and his speed. But I feel like Morales is just, with his length, with his array of attacks, his just overall striking acumen is on another level on the feet in comparison to Matthews, who's traditionally more of a grappler. And Morales has just shown really good takedown defense. I mean, the guy's hard to take down. He's hard to hold down. Even though he doesn't have submissions on his record, he has a decent front choke game that he uses to create scrambles. And I just don't see a lot of outs for Matthews in this fight. I don't think he can use his grappling to stymie Morales. I don't think he can strike with Morales. But one thing about Jake Matthews that you do have to respect is the guy's toughness. The guy's hard to get out of there with strikes. I think he's only been knocked out with strikes like maybe 0 times in his career or 1 time. Usually when he loses, it's via submission. So Morales having no submissions on his record, I could see this being a decision victory for Michael Morales and not a finish, just like the Max Griffin fight. But I don't think it's going to be quite as difficult. I think Max Griffin is a better fighter than Jake Matthews. I feel like this is a bit of a step down. And personally, I'm leaning towards Michael Morales, and I'll say he gets the job done and gets the win here in this one in fairly dominant fashion. And finally, we got the main event. We got Paul Craig taking on Brendan Allen in a grappler's delight kind of fight. But I think if you're Brendan Allen, probably want to keep it more stand-up. And it's it's a great matchup. I mean, you look at Paul Craig, the guy has some elite wins at 205 pounds. Now he's down at 185, where he's a huge guy. And trying to make a run at that weight class. He just went in there in his debut at 185, took out Andre Muniz. And you look at Brendan Allen, this guy's been on a roll. I mean, the guy has a couple losses in the UFC, but overall he's looked really good. I mean, and his losses have aged nicely. I mean, one of those knockout losses, a lot of people are giving him a lot of crap for back in the day, Sean Strickland. The guy's now the champ, so can't give him as much shit for that loss as you used to. And then, obviously, the other loss he had in the UFC was that upset loss to Chris Curtis, who Chris Curtis also is a pretty high-level fighter in the UFC. But since then, I think he's leveled up as well, and I think he's gotten quite better. And he's been finishing these guys. I mean, his last 3 wins are submission victories, and he's been looking really good. And now he's worked his way up to this main event status where he's facing these higher level opponents like Paul Craig. And you look at this matchup, I think that Brendan Allen needs to take a playbook out of Volkan Ozdemir's playbook. The guy that also trained at Killcliff FC to fight Paul Craig, just like Brendan Allen is doing. And I think he needs to use that kind of wrestling in reverse, keep it standing, box him up, use his power, use that improved striking, and keep it more stand up when Paul Craig tries to pull guard. Maybe get on top of him, land some significant strikes, get back up to your feet. And I do think Brendan Allen also has the ability to kind of grind out Paul Craig from the top position and beat him up. I don't necessarily believe that I don't think Brendan Allen is going to go in his guard and be silly and, have those type of mental errors and mental lapses that some of these other guys have had against him. I think he's going to be a little bit smarter with his positioning. I think he's going to try to stay out of the guard. And when he is on top, either be in half guard, side control, a safe position where he doesn't have a lot of submission danger. And I think after he wears on Paul Craig, beats him up a little bit, he can get to those positions easier and not have that same danger that other guys have faced before. One thing about Paul Craig, obviously, you can never count him out. I mean, a guy can get a finish when he's losing 10-8 on 2 judges' scorecards in the last 3 seconds of a fight. But I feel like he definitely has deficiencies. I mean, his striking has improved, but I still think his striking is not very good. I think Brendan Allen has a big edge there, and I just don't think he's going to be able to take Brendan Allen down. I would be very hard-pressed to see him... but hard-pressed to see him take Brendan Allen down. I think that Allen could keep it standing. He has had fights, Brendan Allen, where he's gotten taken down by Jeka Malkoon and some of these other guys, but I just think it's going to be more of a stand-up fight. I think Brendan Allen has progressed since then. I do think on the money line, though, it's definitely a dog or pass. I mean, I don't get how Allen is such a huge favorite, but I just feel like overall he's a good top control grappler as well, so I think he could do well from the top position as long as he just stays out of some danger areas, like I said, and I think he can win on the feet. I think he has the better wrestling, so overall he has the ability to win this fight fairly easily. It's just he has to go out there and avoid the things that Paul Craig does, that he can catch guys in that they know that's what Paul Craig, that's his way to victory, and they still can't stop it. So Paul Craig, the guy's a beast. He's definitely someone you can never count out, but I'm going to go with Brendan Allen, and I think Brendan Allen actually can get the submission himself. We saw Jimmy Crute get the submission on Paul Craig, so I feel like Brendan Allen is going to kind of beat Paul Craig up a little bit on the feet and then eventually either hurt him and get his back or do something and submit him. So I'm going to go with Brendan Allen via submission in the main event. So there you have it, guys. That's my full card breakdown and predictions video for this fight. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something. And like I said at the beginning of the video, we've been on a roll recently with predictions in general, with bets on the Patreon. So go over to patreon.com/prediction support the channel, get access to some of the best betting tips on the internet. And like I said at the beginning of this video, I did do a discount for the non-UFC Patreon members. So if you go sign up, it's only going to be $5 a month, which is, very cheap, man. You can go buy McDonald's for that. So just go over there, help support the channel. Sign up, get access to Bellator, PFL, all these promotions until the end of the year, and definitely think it'll be worth it for you. But as far as most confident pick and parlay of the week for this week, for my most confident pick, I guess I'll go with Christian Leroy Duncan, and for the parlay of the week, I'll say go with Christian Leroy Duncan, Mick Parkin, and Michael Morales. So there you have it, guys. That's the full card breakdown predictions. That's the parlay of the week. That's the most confident pick. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon breaking down another UFC fight card, and I'll talk to you guys later.